Hi guys, it's Blackie.
And Bear.
And this is always number 16. And Bear's got some new books he wants to talk to you about, and I got a couple of knives I want to talk to you about. Other than that, we're just trying to pass on a little information. We greatly appreciate all y'all's comments and things like that, and that gives us ideas for where to go with the next one. So at any time you've got an idea or something, you got a question, feel free. Don't worry about it, it'll be all right. It's just a hat.
Okay.
Anytime you feel that you got a question, feel free to put it down in the comments. We'll do our best to answer it. So, it is October. We're finally in the fall season. I believe bow hunting season should be starting this weekend.
If it's not this weekend, it's next weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that close. Squirrel and rabbit, if I remember correctly, today's started yesterday.
Yeah. So small game is out there right now, and we'll be doing deer. Of course, here in Alabama, hog is year-round. So we've got several year-round meat sources that we can go after. And it should be a pretty good year. We've had water a lot in the early, so we've got a lot of acorns on the ground now. And so that usually, if you've got a good acorn harvest, you've got a good deer and hog harvest. When you and I went down there, two old ways ago, and we're looking in that bottom and seeing how hard it was to find acorns because all the hogs was eating them up. So.
Yeah, we have killed deer in years like this that just had globs of fat on them, and which is good.
Yes.
Which is very good. The fat's not generally very good, but the quality of the meat underneath is.
Yeah, that's one of the things about, you think that a herbivore like a deer would be kind of like a cow, and that the fat would be more appetizing to eat, but really to me deer fat's a little kind of rancid tasting.
Well, it's that the tannins from the acorns is
Yeah.
absorbed into it.
Yeah.
So it tastes like an unwashed acorn, which is, it kind of strong. It's like we were talking earlier. You have when you get acorns out in the woods, there's very few of them that are just palatable straight out of the husk. But most of them you have to cook. Well, not cook, but
Process in some
yeah, you have to process them. You have to boil them a little bit and just keep changing the water until it comes out basically clear. But when you first put that first bath through, it looks like coffee.
Yeah.
It really does.
I've wondered about that because, we've talked about in the past about making acorn bread and all, but I've wondered about, and I haven't tried it, making a mush. Could you boil it and strain the water off until it got clear, and then kind of pound it while it's still, moist, and make like a mush out of it and be able to eat it? You probably have to dress it up, add some spices or something.
Are you talking about like oatmeal or?
Yeah, because you can take hickory nuts and pound them up and boil them and make a mush out of that.
Yeah.
Time gets tough,
Yeah, I'm sure you could with the acorns because, oatmeal is oat berries and cornmeal is corn. It just makes sense that you'd be able to do it with acorns.
I've never tried, but I know back when we were doing living history, doing parched corn,
Oh yeah, that was a staple of Indian diet. They would hit the trail with parched corn and parched acorns and pemmican.
other nuts, walnut, whatever.
Yeah. That's what you put in your war bag.
There was a guy back in the 90s in Muzzleloader magazine that was showing a corn quiver, which was a rectangular bag about that long, made out of like 3 layers of muslin. And then on one end, it was, it's open on one end, sewed shut on the other end, and there's a long tab and then on this end rolled down like 3 times, and then there was a tab that went through, sewed on like a buckle, to hold it rode.
Sort of like the blackbird haversack.
Kind of like that. Roll it over and go through it.
Shameless plug.
And then you went around and tied it, and some of the long hunters would wear them up under their long shirts on the small of their back going crossways, because you could carry, about 2 pounds, maybe a pound and a half, 2 pounds of parched corn in it. And so
That's 3 weeks worth of food.
3 weeks, you just needed one handful a day. It was enough to keep you going. You'd eat it, and since it's parched, it's kind of roasted and dried.
Yeah.
And corn nuts is the modern version of it, guys. Corn nuts.
Now, it's probably easier digestible too, because if you just get you a handful of dried corn, it's going to come out looking exactly like it went in. You can't digest the whole kernel of corn.
It's got to be broke up.
Yeah, it's got to be cracked.
And that's the reason they would pound them and bust them. But back in those days, what I was doing to make this kind of hard ration for the living history was I would take corn nuts and I'd add a little bit of muscovado sugar, or add a little bit of brown sugar to it.
Right.
Sometimes some cashews, some walnut, and then just bust it up. I'd actually pound it up, bust it. So it was all broke up. You could run through a food processor, just a couple of pulses to crack it up. And you take a palm full of it and eat it, and then drink, a big mug of water, and it'd swell up in your stomach. You feel full.
Even if you weren't full,
you weren't. You felt full. And we did a 5-day trek one time where that's all we used was once a day. It was a big palm full of that, and I didn't use a 1 liter soda bottle full of corn for that 5 days.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, the pemmican, we've discussed a little bit of pemmican, and suddenly pemmican is a very popular subject online. A serving of pemmican is only like 1 ounce. That's like 1 inch by 1 inch.
think of like a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Yeah, or one of those shareable Snicker bars.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good. The Reese
Big
cup
one.
and those are good representations of what we're talking about. But that's a whole day's worth. That's like 3,000 calories in that little bitty bar. And you're going to be burning calories out the yoo-hoo when you're out in the woods trying to eke out a living. But the pemmican, that handful of corn, is what got a lot of people through.
Well, and when you're trying to, cook it, it's the backup reserve.
Right.
So that when I do score that fish, that squirrel, that whatever, then I don't eat pemmican, I eat the squirrel or whatever.
Yes.
But in the times that I don't get something, it's something to keep me from going hungry. Because most people today have never been hungry. Now, I'm not saying you've never gone without a meal.
Most people in the United States.
In the United States have never truly been hungry, where you haven't eaten in 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
You
And didn't have any prospects.
don't have any prospects, and you just feel weak and etc. But today they've started doing it as a weight loss fad of limited fasting, they're calling it, and we just call it being poor. Where we're on 1 meal a day to the end of the month, guys. That's all we can afford. And it was not some big, banquet. It was a meal a day. I grew up, we had that because we were poor. And we had to just do what we had. So pemmican or something like that, and you kind of condition the person, their immune system, their response system, etc., to adapt to it. And when you've gone your whole life where you eat 3 meals a day, whether you want them or not, you suddenly go to this system and things go sideways in a hurry because your body's just not adapted to it. You're not conditioned to it. I remember reading World War II, there was these conscientious objectors that they did not want to go to war, and they had legitimate religious reasons why not, but they said they'd volunteer for anything else. You put us stateside loading trucks, whatever, we'll be happy to do it. And they were in college up in one of the New England colleges. And so what they decided to do is do a test and starve them. And because they had heard about all these concentration camps, etc. And so these 70 or 80 individuals agreed to the study, and they went without food long term, where they were getting just tiny amounts ever so often. And for 2 years they starved them, and they were monitored almost every 2 or 3 days by medical. In fact, I think they were in medical school. Is the reason they were doing it, and letting them stay. But at the end of it, you would think, at the end of that 2 years, that man, they just want to eat everything in sight. But actually, they became the other. They kept up with them to the 1950s. And the study talked about how they would take 3 hours to eat a meal. They would chew really slowly, savor every second, even though, you know, there's no limitation, eat all you want now. But they ate smaller portions, and they just would eat so slowly, because all of them, it wasn't that they had been told to do it, but they became obsessed with enjoying every bite, you know.
Yeah, 2 quick comments. One of the big mistakes that our guys made, with the best of intentions, okay, absolutely the best of intentions, when they would liberate a concentration camp, is they would start throwing food at the inmates hand over fist, and you can't do that.
They couldn't take it.
They would die. They would literally die. Second thing, my mother's oldest brother was a POW during World War II in Germany, and ate some fairly disgusting things. And for the rest of his life, he had a habit of smelling his food. Mm-hmm. It was an unconscious thing, because he had to smell it in the camp to make sure it was palatable, that he could eat it. But yeah, I remember very well watching him do that, and talking about, and his younger brother somewhere has a piece of sawdust bread that's put up that I have actually seen. It's like a brick. Literally, it's like an old-time clay brick, and you can look at that and you can see the chunks of wood in the bread. Where my other uncle would have to. That's what he ate. That and a very, very weak potato soup. But carrying on with a delightfully, brilliantly bright conversation, we did that in 15. Blackie brought out his chuck boxes, and as I was watching the replay when it aired, I thought, you dummy, you've got the perfect addition to that kit. And this is it. This is a World War II issue GI stove, and it comes in these containers. It's just your basic Coleman, is what it is. But it folds up till it's about the size of a large soup can. And in theory, this was made to cook in.
In theory.
In theory.
In reality, the gasoline fumes in it made it where you didn't want to do it.
I'm sure that it would make anything in the world taste like gasoline, but you know, you did not use that, and this was your cup or your bowl to drink or eat out of. And you know, it's very, very compact. Like you saw me when I unfolded this. I mean, it's the size of my canteen.
A lot of times these are called foxhole stoves and stuff like that, and a lot of the GIs could get them. They use regular gasoline, which was leaded gasoline back in them days. But you can siphon that out of a truck or whatever, and you know, not everybody was issued one of these, but like one guy in the platoon, one guy in the company, or the squad would carry one, especially in cold climates where they could melt snow, and that's where this would come in handy. You would pack this solid full of snow, put it up there and melt it, be able to fill up a canteen when you couldn't get running water, but you're surrounded by snow.
Honestly though, the interesting thing is most of these wound up in a ditch.
Yeah.
Because as convenient as they are, they get in the way. Okay, it was a really good idea that was not thought through very well. But I bought this one online, and they're available. It's the complete kit. It's even got the little wrench to break it down completely. And one of my projects to do, Blackie and I, right after I got it, he and I tried to fire it up, but it leaks right down in here, and I've got to get with Coleman and order replacement parts for this.
Where the regulator screws on, there's a seal that goes in there, and what it is when you turn these stoves on, there's a brass seal, and you're supposed to turn it wide open, so it's brass on brass. If you leave it at a lower throttle, the heat can come around that brass over time and actually attack that seal.
Yeah.
So that seal has gotten weak on his.
But the way this works is you pump it up and you turn on the gas, and it pumps raw fuel up into this little burner. Let me see if I can put that down. Yeah. It pumps raw fuel into this cup, and that's where your fire's generated, is over that raw fuel. And then of course these stand up to hold your pots and pans and mess kits and whatever. But flame adjuster, here's where you add your fuel at.
And where you pump it up, it's a standard little small Coleman set.
Yeah, you can see the pump right there. But hopefully before too long, we will get it working and we can actually demonstrate it. For those of you who are wondering, we tried today to order my camera. That's what's been my holdup, is getting my own camera.
For Bear's channel.
Yeah. And then when I hit the add to cart button, it said we can't do that at this time. So, we're still working. It's a.
The good news is Bear does have a teenage daughter, and she probably knows more than us combined on how to order something off of the internet. So
yeah, she and my teenage son, they live on their phones.
So we'll work this out. I'm sure it's just a clearance or something he's got to do. But yeah, a small stove like that for a kit, a bug out set, or whatever. Now, what the Germans did was an S-bit stove. And you can do an S-bit stove on your own if you'll just look around during the summertime when you've got all the barbecue stuff out in your big box store. You're going to have these solid cubes that are barbecue lighters. That's S-bit fuel is what it is. It's a solid gelled alcohol basically that you can ignite and sit on top of it for people that are scared of it going whoosh and etc. So, and those can be used quite well, to heat up or whatever. A trick that I've used several times and have demonstrated of taking 3 steel tent stakes and putting them in the ground fairly close together where I can sit the pot on top of the tent stakes, and then underneath it putting a piece of aluminum foil or something and putting one of those S-bits and setting it afire and letting the heat come up. That worked just fine. Sterno, stuff like that is really meant more to heat rather than bring to a boil. It's great for that's where you see them with chafing dishes and stuff like that. It's to keep food warm or to warm it up to an edible point, not bring it to a boil. So if you're looking for something to boil water, something pressurized is the way to go, or a true alcohol stove. If you're looking for something to heat food up with, those little cubes or something like that will work just as fine.
To plug a friend of ours' channel, James Bender on Waypoint Survival,
yes,
has several videos where he actually builds an S-bit stove that goes in an Altoids can. So, check James out. He's got it. He's got all that down to a fine art.
Yeah, James Bender on Waypoint Survival. Just look on YouTube, Waypoint Survival. He's a good fellow, friend of ours. Go check him out. Now, what I've got today was I have a couple of finds that I picked up not terribly long ago I want to talk about. This is a case 2X butcher knife. I paid $1 for it. And this is an old hickory knife that we used to call these scalpers. I'm not sure what the modern name for it is. But you notice it's got a boning type point, and this is a butcher knife. It's got that butcher tip on it. They're both in really good shape. They're good steel. The handles are a little worn, but they're still usable. Okay. Now, where you find stuff like this? Going to your garage sales, estate sales, and things like that are a great way to find a lot of this gear for very cheap. Because a lot of times, especially an estate sale, is some family member, an old coot like me, has passed away. Hey, baby. And whenever they pass away, the kids come in and they don't want any of this crap. You know,
Granddad's junk.
Granddad's junk. They want the house. They want the car. They may want the TV.
They may want the old shotgun.
They want the shotgun, maybe, if it ain't a single shot. But at the same time, all the cast iron cooking gear, they could care less. You know, the wood stove that's worked for 30 years and has heated his house, they could care less. The carbon steel kitchen knives, they could care less. Let that go by. And since they don't care about any of this stuff, they ain't putting a high value on it. So it's your opportunity to pick it up. So educate yourself a little bit, get an idea. Now, Blackie, I don't need a big old butcher knife. If you're hunting a cheap, good bushcraft knife, get an old butcher knife and cut it down to shorter. Makes a really good knife for bushcraft.
Those were gold in the Western fur trade because the traders, the mountain men, would buy those things up by the dozen and pack them out to the natives in the areas that they were wanting to trade for beaver. And you could probably get at least a couple of beaver skins for that knife.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, out there, that was high speed, low drag. And there's a reason why that design is 124 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Because it works.
It works very, very well, especially for piercing up under, and then you take that angle and you go up under the hide, and then that slope there at the tip, the hide rolls up. So you push through the hide and you just like a zipper, you open it up. And when you're trying to butcher something big, like a cow, a big goat,
A
buffalo, whatever,
yeah,
you need that kind of knife. And thin has its advantages.
Yeah. You need that kind of horsepower.
It's long enough to make the long cuts, and yet it's thin enough and it's flexible enough. And that's one of the things people don't get. These old carbon steel knives are kind of like a spring steel. They'll flex, which is a big advantage. They don't bend and not come back. Where a lot of the stainless steel knives, they bend and you got a bent knife. You got to straighten it back out. These thin knives like this that are the long, sharp point are more of a boning knife. They're for getting the meat off of the bone, going in deep up under there.
Yeah. Once you quarter the animal up into the primals, what they call the primal cuts, you come back in with that boning knife and you cut out your steaks and you cut out your belly meat and you cut out whatever, you know, however finely you want to tune it. That's what that skinny blade's for.
When, you know, I kind of shocked somebody not terribly long ago, we were talking, and he wanted me to sit down in detail to him how to butcher a cow and make all these fancy cuts. And I told him, I'll be honest with you, I'm sorry. Do I know how to butcher a cow? Yes. But do I know how to make such and such roast? No, that's a butcher.
Yeah, butchering a cow, butchering a pig, butchering a rabbit, butchering a squirrel, butchering a deer. I mean, it's all generally the same thing, just different sizes.
And then when you're trying to get a certain cut,
Yeah, yeah.
that's butcher knowledge. That's not
That's
just
skill.
processing.
That's skill,
Yeah.
knowledge.
We were more interested in just getting a hunk of meat. You know, what is it? It's cow.
Yeah.
You know, it's from the shoulder, it's from the butt, it's the back strap. You know, all that I knew.
One of the
But,
things, go ahead.
go ahead, but when somebody said, no, I want to do a crown roast, go find a butcher.
Actually, the crown roast isn't that difficult because that's got the ribs on it. You wind it around, it looks like a crown.
You know more than me. I know what one is, but how to cut it out of cow, I don't.
I watch YouTube.
Yeah, because what I did was we were just processing it for meat, you know, but none of these fancy cuts and stuff. It was a hunk of meat.
Yeah, that's why when we're out here processing deer, we wind up with a lot of ground deer because can you get the tenderloin? Can you get the back strap? Can you get whatever? Yeah, you can get them. It's not a problem. Can you cut a chop off of a deer? Yeah, but it's going to be about like that big.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like a pork chop, and it's not going to be like a T-bone steak. They come from the same area, but it ain't going to be the same.
It's how big a hunk of muscle is on that animal at that time.
Yeah, we wind up with a lot of roast.
And most of our whitetails guys, the average whitetail is going to be somewhere around like 125, 135 pounds.
Yeah.
Realistic.
And that's dressed weight.
Dress weight. Now you're going to have that 200 pounder
Yeah.
once in a while. That's one eating good, you know,
Right.
and exercising, and he get big. But what typically happens with ours down here is whenever they get just unlimited food, they've got now, because everybody's got deer feeders everywhere. All it does is make fat. You know, he doesn't get to be necessarily that big a deer. He just gets to be a fat deer. And since we've already said you're probably not going to eat the fat because it tastes like acorns.
If you're feeding deer and you're feeding them heavy corn or peanuts, you can actually take the acorn fat and the corn fat side by side and see the difference. The acorn fat looks sort of like dull butter. It's a yellowish brown.
Mm-hmm.
The corn or peanut fat is going to be pure creamy white, just like beef fat. And you can actually eat that. That actually tastes good. I would not necessarily advise using the brown acorn fat in the same manner. But hey, try it. Do you? You may take a bite out of it and you may enjoy it. That's great.
Well, back when I was actively hunting so much and we were young coming up, like I said,
I'm still young, hush.
oh, people were, we weren't allowed to feed deer intentionally.
No, that's a new deal.
That's a brand new deal, like in the last few years. And so it was forbidden. Well, of course, when you harvested peanuts down here in the fall, there's just dripping peanuts out of every peanut thing. So you'd have these, quarter-mile across peanut field, and every row has got like you're walking along dropping peanuts. So there was plenty of peanuts. And so deer would be in the peanut fields and stuff like that. But for the most part, our deer were so lean because they weren't feeding them and they had to travel. And so when you got your deer stand, you were there before dawn waiting. You were catching the deer that had been out feeding.
Yeah.
And he's coming back, going to the bedroom that he's planning, and you'd catch him in the move. Today, they got feeders running in every field, 24 hours a day slinging feed, so now the deer become just nocturnal. They come out after dark. They ain't got to come out early. They know where the food's at. They're going to go down there, they're going to eat till he's busting at the gut full, and then he's going to chase the little girls around for a little bit, or not, and then he's going to be back in bed about sunup.
Yeah, or shortly thereafter.
So you don't hardly see him moving.
Two things. Alabama allows farmers to buy permits to kill deer that are eating the crops. The major drawback to that is they have to leave the deer where it's at. They can't go out there and get it and put it in their freezer, which I do not agree with. Okay, let me state emphatically, I do not agree with that practice. It's wasteful. It's very, very wasteful. Secondly, Alabama, to their defense, now allows you to buy a permit to hunt over feed.
$15 you can hunt over corn.
Yeah, you can buy a permit to put in with your license where you can pour corn out on the ground or peanuts out on the ground or whatever, and then find you a nice shady spot and sit back and hunt on top of it. It allows you to hunt year round. The permit is for 12 months, and you can hunt turkey over it, you can hunt deer over it, you can hunt whatever over it.
No, you cannot. It says specifically,
Does it?
you hunt deer or hog. It does not say, unless they've changed it, that you can hunt anything else. Because the very first year they announced you were going to be able to do it, I had all these guys running in wanting to buy, because I was selling hunting permits back then. And they wanted to buy it because of dove season.
Yeah, dove's not on the list.
Dove ain't on that list.
Dove's not on the list.
So and then you got to be 100 yards away out of plain sight for a non-listed species.
Yeah.
But you can be sitting there looking at it and hunt for a listed species like deer or hog. So they're trying to do it that way, but I mean, I have rednecks coming in, they thought that they were going to be hunting dove over it and everything else. No, you cannot hunt dove, only hog and deer. And it did not say at that time, which I have not read the book now in 2 years, but it did not say turkey could be hunted over corn.
I may be mistaken. If I am, I apologize.
That's one of them things where, that all the rednecks suddenly thought, oh, heck, we can pay $15 and we can hunt. No. That's a guaranteed way they're going to get you stuck, too, is you out there, well, I can hunt it. No. You can hunt at night in the state of Alabama with a light, actually a red light or whatever, for coyote, because that's a predator. The same guy with the same gun with the same light, if they think you're hunting deer, is illegal.
Right.
But if you're hunting coyote or hunting hog, it's legal.
Yeah. That's one of those things you have to be very mindful of the caliber. If you've got a 30-06, you're fair game to the game warden.
Either way.
If you're shooting a 17 was it HMR?
HMR 17?
Yeah, 17 HMR, then that's going to be coyotes.
Yeah, but even working where I was selling guns, and not long after that 17 HMR really hit the market years ago and became big and hot, right? First one I ever sold up there at the store. Sold it to the guy, and he came back 3 days later and told me he didn't like it because he shot a doe in the head with it and she didn't go down. I went, you damn idiot, it's illegal to hunt
Anything under 22.
anything under 22.
Yeah.
You can't shoot that with, it's for prairie dogs, it's for squirrels, it's small games. Well, it's moving so fast, I figured it'd blow their head off. No.
Point. A 22 center fire in a 223 caliber is legal for deer.
In 5.56.
5.5, don't.
5.56 223.
Yeah.
Not in 22 long rifle or
No.
22 Magnum.
It's got to be a center fire. It's got to be a 223 5.56 caliber. Your standard AR or AR clone caliber. You can't just go get a 22 Hornet and go out and start hunting deer. They're going to get you on that too.
And even in that, it has to be, according to Alabama law, center fire,
Right.
mushrooming ammunition.
Yes.
Which means full metal jacket 5.56 cannot be used.
No.
They
Don't even have it in your gun.
don't have it with you. They
Don't have it
busted a
with
guy north of Mobile back about 2017, something like that. He was shooting hogs with a AR, and when they came up found him down there hunting hogs, and he'd done shot 3 or 4 hogs. And he was using an AR with a high capacity mag, and he had 10 30-round mags on his chest, fully loaded. They didn't care it was a high capacity mag. They didn't care he had 30, but he was completely loaded with 5.56 full metal jacket. So they fined him when alcohol was involved, and he didn't know when to shut up. Okay?
It's amazing how the alcohol will do that.
They fined him $100 per bullet.
Oh. Ouch.
So 10 30-round mags and a 30-round mag in the gun, 100 rounds per bullet's what they fined him.
Wow.
But their alcohol was involved, and he was too dumb to shut up.
Yeah, generally you're going for deer, you'll be confined to a 10-round magazine, 10 rounds or less. That's right.
Yeah, which now you're talking about hunting guns, etc.
Right.
The bottom line is most bolt action. There are 10-round capacity bolt action rifles.
Yeah, I've got one.
The Lees, military,
Yeah.
some of them will actually hold 11.
The Enfield.
Yeah, the Enfield's a whole 11.
The British 303 Enfield will hold 10 down and 1 in the pipe.
Yeah, so, it's one of those things, whenever we don't need to get off into gun stuff, but,
Gee, Uncle Blackie.
I've got a Henry rifle, one of the original type Henrys, and it holds 14 rounds
Yeah,
of 44-40.
yeah. Which is a
And,
good soft mushrooming.
oh yeah, and I'm shooting all legal ammunition, but my magazine capacity, there's no way to limit it because it's a tube. You go up and you just drop them down, and so I can have 5-6 rounds in it, but my capacity is possibly a 14. So a Civil War era, tactical gun, it has a higher magazine capacity than would be legal.
I think it was Bedford Forrest that said that it was that damn Yankee gun that you load on Sunday and fire all week.
Shoot all week, yep. And I took a lot of deer with that gun. So, and it's very effective.
That may have been Beauregard that said that. I don't remember. Anyway, I digress.
I may have been around, but I wasn't taking notes, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I kind of figured you were old.
Yeah, but anyway, back to back what I was talking about. If you go to estate sales, if you go to thrift stores, Goodwill even sometimes will have this stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can pick up as raw materials and resources. I've mentioned several times on my channel talking about black powder guns and stuff. People say, where are you getting patches? I go by the Goodwill and I come in and I say, you got a bed sheet? And you'll have an old stained up bed sheet, they'll sell it to you for $1. And I just sit there and watch TV and take a pair of scissors and start cutting up. And I'll make a bag of cleaning patches,
Yeah, and big boxes like Walmart sell a cloth cutter that you can, it's like the old paper hole cutters, and you can just cut cloth. I'll just sit there and watch it and pull cloth through and pop it out.
Yeah.
Pop out clean patches for your loads.
Yeah, get one of the 2-inch cutters.
Yeah.
And just make 2-inch round patches, just going down the line.
And you can do a lot of really good things with that. There was something. Oh yeah, when you go to Goodwill, if you have a cotton shirt, you can do cotton shirts. You can do old cotton shirts the same way. And you can make charcloth out of them.
Yeah.
And you've got 50 cents in a great big pile of these things.
Yeah, go look at Goodwills for old blue jeans.
Yeah.
Look for the blue jeans that got holes in them that nobody wants, whatever. That huge size, I picked up a pair of well-loved and well-worn Wrangler blue jeans. It was 100% cotton about 3 years ago. And I think my cost of that pair of pants, because nobody could wear that huge size, was like $2.50. Well, I came home and I cut it up and I made charcloth out of it. Resources.
Yeah, if you have kids that have outgrown their blue jeans, if you have like little kids that are growing up, if you don't have a source to donate the pants to or the shirts, do that. Make you cleaning patches and make you charcloth. You'll have more charcloth and cleaning patches than you'll ever use in a lifetime, potentially.
And that's just it. whenever we were coming up and being poor, my grandmother always said, before you throw it in the garbage, stand there and think about it.
Yeah.
And you come up with 3 things you could do with this. I mean, we soup cans would be recycled. You know, back in those days, all Coke and all soda bottles were in glass bottles and were recycled. And then, oh no, that's not good, we want plastic. Now, everything's full of plastic, and now they're saying go back to glass. Because we could recycle it. Most plastic cannot be recycled.
Yeah, you get to a point where it's just, you can't do anything with it.
And so, I mean, we took stuff, we recycled it, we made it into something else. And just think about it. The stuff that we took, all the table scraps, and that went in the compost pile to go in the garden.
Yeah.
Always find a way to recycle it or trade it off to somebody. I went to the shooting range not long ago, and there was this guy like 3 bases down from me, and he was just banging away. And whenever he got done, he loaded up and he left. I walked down there, and in the range cup was 500 rounds of 9mm brass. He threw it away because he didn't want it.
Absolutely, take it on.
Well, I got a use for that puppy, you know, and so I picked it up. And times got hard back 2008 or whatever, and you couldn't find ammo. I had buckets of brass for calibers I didn't shoot, and I took it and sold them off. People that were desperately hunting. It's a resource.
Right.
You know.
And it's good, quick cash.
Yeah. There's always something, if you look around and you think about it a minute, to recycle. And that was one of the reasons that when we were growing up, Grandma and all of them recycled every dang thing.
I've told the story about following my granddaddy down here on our farm, picking up nails.
Yeah.
And me irritating my grandmother by straightening on the front porch with a hammer.
Yeah.
Under the close guided supervision of my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most times she would just stay in the back of the house and do grandmother things. But
we take the plastic soda bottles and we cut the bottom off of it, turned it upside down, and put the potting soil and all into it, and that was the starter for the tomato plants.
Yeah.
So it'd drain out.
you can also take a glass bottle and flip it over in the pot and fill it up with water, and it automatically waters. It won't drain out. If the ground's already moist, it won't drain out. It'll just stay there in the cup and just slowly drain out and
drain
keep the plant
into it.
watered.
Yeah, the thing on the ironing board was one of the early plastic bottles. Actually, it was an alcohol bottle that my grandmother punched, the rubbing alcohol bottle.
Yeah.
Punched 2 or 3 holes in the lid with a hot nail. She clamped on a nail onto a pair of ice grips and held it against the eye of the stove until it got hot. And then she melted her 3 or 4 holes in that lid. That'd be filled full of water, and she'd screw it, and she'd sit there and squirt water on the stuff for ironing and stuff like that, and you'd sprinkle that and rub that thing out. Everything was recycled.
And the water that was in the bottle was collected rainwater.
Yeah.
That's what our mothers and grandmothers did. I can remember my my mother-in-law, my former mother-in-law. She had a collection bowl, a bucket, underneath the eave of her house, about like a 5-gallon bucket, and that was her ironing water. And it would get full, and she'd put a lid on it and take it in, put it up on the porch. And when she needed water for her ironing, she'd go out there, like he was saying, with that bottle and dip it in there and fill it up and go do her ironing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it didn't have it didn't have all the additives they put in our water.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just clean, clear water.
And when you run an iron across it, it leaves spots on stuff. It was the stuff, fluoride and stuff like that in the water would leave spots.
Yeah.
So she didn't want that. She wanted straight rainwater. It was basically sterile water. Oh yeah, I remember a rainwater bucket like that was kept at the eave of the house, and that was for certain plants. Granny had roses that were real sensitive, and she was very particular about what went into that. So regular tap water wasn't used for those. She did this because it would mean they didn't bloom as much, etc. I mean, people were really industrious back then days. You think about it, they weren't educated. You'd be surprised surprised what Grandma and Granddaddy knew and how well they knew it back in those days. I would give anything to have a week with my grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
And now I would have worthy questions to ask. I didn't back then.
When you're 6, 8, or 10, you're not going to ask those kind of questions.
No.
I was fortunate enough to have my last grandparent up with me until I was almost 19 years old. Well, I was 19 when she died. And my first one died when I was 5. And at 5, you know, there were no questions other than, you know, can we go for a walk? Can we go play in the yard? You know.
My grandfather on my mother's side, Arthur, he had only one arm. In an industrial accident in a cotton mill, his right arm had been torn off.
Yeah.
And in a piece of machinery, it just pulled it straight out of the meat. And so he had a stump they had sewed up, so he did everything. But he could do anything I could do, but he did it one-handed. If I learned anything from him, and he passed away when I was 4, I watched him, we lived in the same house, I watched him, and he would find ways to do stuff one-handed.
Yeah.
There, you know, even that little bitty 2-inch nub, he had a way he could hook and hold something, and you know, it was, I asked him about it, you know, I do remember asking him about it, did it hurt? He said, no, it makes you mad sometimes, but it don't hurt.
Yeah, one of my pet peeves is these people who will, of all ages, I mean, it's not age specific, they will look at a challenge and they'll go, I can't do that. I wish I had a nickel for every time I looked at my kids and says, don't give me one reason why you can't. Look at that, look at it from every angle and give me 4 why you can.
Yeah, because yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but that's the point. You know, yeah, it's a challenge. You can't do certain things, but you can do a whole lot of others.
Yeah.
You don't throw the entire car away because it's got a flat tire.
No. I'll reverse what I said.
Yeah.
Don't give me 4 reasons why you can't do something. Study and give me the one reason why you can.
Yeah.
I've told my kids that for years.
Yeah. And I've seen people with real, you know, blind in one eye, completely blind, tone deaf, no depth perception. I mean, all kinds of problems, and yet they found a way to adapt. If you think about it, you just don't give up. And there's some people that are truly, they don't have a lot of options. But even then, a lot of people that you would think would have no options, if they would just make an effort and they would think about it and work on it, they'll find a way to adapt.
Think about it. Just consider.
There was a family member, he came back out of World War II and he was blind. There had been an explosion, and the sheer force of the explosion, he'd been looking at a port in a tank, and it hit him in the face and his eyes were basically smashed. He was blind. And so he'd come back, and what he ended up doing was working for the phone company because his hearing was so good.
Yeah.
And his job for the phone company back in the 60s was he would dial numbers and listen for the clicks for the relay. Now today you got computers that do all that work. But back in them days it was a person did that, and he was stone cold blind, and that's all he did 8 hours a day was he dialed phone numbers, and then he would listen to the clicks and know, okay, that's relay 1, that's relay 2, that's relay 3, and he's calling Rome, he's calling France, he's calling whatever for the phone company, and it was just checking relays and finding out where a relay needed to be repaired or upgraded or whatever. And he worked for the phone company for 20 years. He went to work for him like 62, and he retired in like 82 or 83. I was just about to get out of high school whenever he finally retired. So, you know, what do you do all day? I stay on the phone. He used to say at family reunion, I'm on the phone all day, you know, but he made a good living doing that.
That's good. We ready to go to this?
Yep, go to your books.
We're both great advocates of books and hardbound books. not necessarily ebooks, although they do have their place. There are circumstances where you will lose that ebook and you cannot get it back. It won't come back. But I've added some to the collection. If you want to go back and double check the old ways, like what is it, two,
Something
three,
like that.
something like that. I think it's 2.
10 or so old ways ago.
Yeah, we discussed books at various points through the series, and 2 of the books that Blackie has been talking about recently were these, Where There Is No Doctor
I'll show that.
and Where There Is No Dentist. Now, these are very, very simple books because they're designed to be placed in cultures that they don't have a lot of technical ability. There's a lot of illustrations in
A lot
here.
of third world country type stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of illustrations where you may not be able to read the print, but you can read the picture. Or somebody in the village can read the print to you. But it talks about rehydration.
Think of it kind of like an advanced first aid.
Yeah,
For like a first responder, where there ain't going to be a first responder, you're it.
yeah, you're it. We've said it before, I will say it again. If you're near a community college that has a basic first aid class or an emergency medical technician basic class, take them. This will be extra arrows in that quiver. Okay. I was at one time a licensed EMT intermediate and could do everything but push the medications that a paramedic did. But these are a good resource for filling in that gap. I've also started collecting some books on herbs and forests and herbs and foraging. Couldn't say foraging.
Yeah, foraging.
Foraging.
Finding wild stuff to eat and use for medicinal tricks.
Yes, and y'all know that I'm a big proponent of the Peterson's guides. They're excellent sources, and I have bought. You get these pop-ups on YouTube where they're pushing books, and I've got several of them. I've got the Old Wayz book. I've got. I can't remember what the other one is that I've got. It's by the same lady that wrote this one. This is the Forager's Guide to Wild Foods, and it's not regional specific. It covers all the regions of the United States.
Good overview.
It's a very good overview.
And would be very helpful, especially if you're thinking you might have to relocate.
Yeah, if you live in Northwest Florida and your bug out is in Middle Arkansas in the Ozark Mountains, that's the book you need.
All right, where is it? It ain't got an ISBN on the back.
Yeah, I bought it off YouTube.
All right, so she must be selling them herself.
Yeah, it's a self-print book.
All right, so it does not have a UPC on it. Okay, but it's right there's the name, Nicole Applin, PhD.
Yeah, Nicole Applin.
There we go.
She is a PhD who I'm seriously learning to respect her abilities. She was a contestant on Alone, I believe it was Alone, and she was trained by Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert when she was doing her undergrad work, her graduate work. Most times on the show Alone, folks don't turn out very well. I think she actually gained weight. But anyway, good source. All right. I have been watching some other channels, and one of my favorites is mom and a daughter called the Honeystead, and they plug. They really This is their book, one of their books. The New Holistic Herbal by David Hoffman. It is a good inroad. It helps you treat nervous system. These are recommendations for nervous system situations, digestive system situations, where we are not plugging this as a medical replacement for your doctor, okay? But if what you're doing with him doesn't work and you want to try something, this is a good source.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things is use it as a additive, you know.
Yeah, as a supplement.
And especially when, let's say, things are just getting really hard, really tight, and really expensive. Something that's not that bad, but it's a minor irritation, there may be something here that will help, something minor that keeps you from having to go get that big medical bill. But we're always going to recommend, if you have any concerns, go talk to a doctor, okay? We do not in any way tell you to just avoid doctors, go talk to a doctor.
Right.
But like I said, you know, I already know I got arthritis really bad. If they got something in here that says this helps a little bit with arthritis, I've already been diagnosed with arthritis. We know it's the same thing that's been there forever, that type of thing. See? There's that. And then there's the ISBN number. There you go.
This is another book by Mr. Hoffman called The Complete Herbal Source Book. It's good. I mean, it's not the end-all be-all, I don't guess, but it's a very good source. It tells you about different like pokeweed, pomegranate, prickly ash, pumpkin. It's the different herbs, and it tells you about the volatile oils that each plant has that benefits you. It's an in-depth. This is a deep read, or can be a deep read, but it's a good source. You know, this builds off of that.
Mm-hmm. They make a good companion to each other.
They do.
Yeah, I'll show that one. And that's just it. When you're going to do this type of stuff, you need a library, because don't trust just one source. Have regional source that is for your zone, an overall source. Go through and actually look at it and make sure they ain't just copying the same book. You know what I mean? And then that way, if I have a tummy bug, okay, and there is no chance to go anywhere else, I have multiple sources. I start looking up tummy problem on every one of them, and like get different opinions on what might be the way to go to fix it. And so it's a way that I can kind of help myself in situations where I'm not in a position to go get something else.
If you're looking through this book and you find something that says, hey, that's interesting, let me look deeper into it, go to Peterson, cross-reference it through Peterson, and say, well, it says the same thing here. Maybe this is legit. And you can come down here and ask Dr. Applin what she thinks, and there's your third source for your product that says exactly the same thing. So, you know, try it. Now, I have 3 sons, 2 grandsons, and myself. So I bought this one for us. This is Herbal Healing for Men. Sorry, ladies. But it's a good source, and it's also a good reference, a cross-reference for these.
Rosemary Gladstar. There you go.
Now, taking that coin and turning it around, I have 2 daughters-in-law, a daughter and a granddaughter, and a mother. This is Herbal Healing for Women. Okay, we're trying to develop equal opportunity healing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got specific issues that the ladies have that we don't, as guys don't, and it will. You know, you can cross-reference this with these, and if everybody's saying the same thing, try it. There's no harm in trying.
Right. I remember the military, I think it was the Marine Corps, did a study back in the 70s whenever they're going to allow women to be integrated into regular combat units. And the Marine Corps pointed out that there were 168 physiological differences between men and women, where women process oxygen at like an 80% and men process it like 70%. They're more efficient at this, more efficient at that. And that relates to other things, you know, because they're different physically than us. And so medicine has to be focused a little differently to them. What will absorb quickly in them would absorb much slower in us because we're less efficient at X.
Right.
So.
Now, another book that was recommended to me off of the channel that I mentioned a few minutes ago are these two books. This one is Southeast Foraging. That's specifically from basically the Potomac River south to the Gulf and west underneath the Ohio out to the Mississippi. Might get a little bit of Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma in there as well, maybe some Kansas. But this is primarily that area, and it's a good book.
They're more focused toward us.
Yeah.
And they will have books like this for where you're at. So, like I said, a good mindset of such a reference library is, I want overview, really well written overview, big picture type stuff. I want focused like this for my region. Yes. So I know what I'm looking for here, you know. I had a good friend of mine that we were doing some stuff back about 2005, 2006. And he kept pointing out that there was this plant he really wanted to find because it was such and such. And me and him went out on these little things, and he showed me pictures of it. And didn't spark a memory with me. And so after we had done a couple of little foraging looking for this thing, of the conditions it said it grew in and etc., I looked it up and found out that it only grows in Canada and Michigan. I went, why are we looking for this? You didn't go far enough to find out what region it's in.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about this book, Southeast Foraging, it's by a gentleman named Chris Bennett. Well, Chris is from Birmingham. So, I mean, this
major city here in Alabama.
Yeah, this is really regional specific to Alabama, Georgia, Florida.
Now, this is the guy you said that you would love for you and I to interview sometime.
Yeah, yeah, I would be willing to go to Birmingham to meet him, to do a talk with him.
Excellent.
But there is an ISB on the back.
Yeah, that would be, you know, see if he'd be interested in us coming up. We'd take a road trip, go to Birmingham for your channel, let's say, and go do an interview. That looks interesting. 120 wild and flavorful edibles from Angelica to wild plums.
Yeah. And what this guy does, part of the way he earns his living is by going out and foraging these wild edibles and selling them to restaurants in the Birmingham area. Mm-hmm. That's a significant source of income for him, so he knows what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
This one is by a gentleman, Corey Pine Shane, and he is the founder of the Blue Ridge School of Herbal Medicine in Asheville, North Carolina, which is, you know, it's several hours off, but it's a drivable close. I've thought about trying to take a couple of classes up there in my time off, but he talks about prickly ash, and he talks about pokeberries, and motherwort, not sure what that's all about. Relaxing herb that helps the heart, calms the mind, and balances hormones. Okay.
Yeah, something kind of like black cohosh.
Yeah.
And that's just the thing. What part of what we're sharing with you guys is our growth as well. We're still learning just like you are.
Oh yeah, if a really good day is a day that you can learn something.
And we've got to the point now where you go into the standard big box bookstore, and 90% of the stuff I look at on the shelf, it's a rerun of the SAS Survival Manual or whatever. So books that I would be interested in are original sources. Small publications like this, for somebody's got some real knowledge. Things like that are what I'm looking for to add to my library to enhance my knowledge and me be able to bring you guys stuff so I can actually learn and bring it to you guys.
Right, we are students too. Everybody is a student on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
But this is called Southeast Medicinal Plants, and the ISB is on the back.
Okay. I haven't seen this one yet. There we go.
But these are books that I have purchased since we've done Old Wayz 2, and thought it would be a good time to bring them out and introduce them to you if you don't already know about them, and give you options that you can expand your horizons.
Because that was the whole focus of us doing this series, was we talked about how you could go to your local co-op and get important information about canning, food preparation, etc.
Yeah, your county extension office.
Your county extension office. We've talked about that, resources. We brought out sites and stuff like that of other good sources, books and stuff. And it's one of them things, like today, me talking about finding knives.
Yeah.
It's about where to look. I mean, that's the number one thing. The road to wisdom begins with the statement, I do not know. So,
and where can I find it?
And where can I find it? And so I never thought, I like you back whenever I was getting early into muzzleloading, I'd go down here and buy these bags of patches. And that started getting expensive because I didn't know. And I remember a trip where, we were dropping off some old clothes or something. Mom said go drop them off at the Goodwill. So I went down there. It was Christian Mission back in that day. It wasn't Goodwill. And I came in, was dropping it off, and I happened to turn and look over, and here's a flannel sheet for a king-size bed that's got a big old stain in the middle of it. And the lady was saying, we can't sell it because it's got a stain in it, and they'd done washed it, and they couldn't get that stain out. And in my mind, what I saw was a huge pile of flannel gun patches.
Yeah.
I went, how much for that sheet? And she said, oh, it's dirty, you can't use it. That's correct. How much for this sheet? And she said, $2, sold. You know how big a king-size bed is?
72 by 72.
And it's a fitted flannel sheet. But that rolls over the sides. I had 2 or 3 years worth of patches for that $2,
Yeah.
But
That's a good barter.
yeah, and that's one thing. Until that moment, it had never dawned on me to go to Goodwill to look for that. Those that are around, I'll share this with you for those of my followers that's down here in Florida. And this may be true where you're at, okay? September, you want to go to the Goodwills in your tourist places because almost all of the hotels, like down here along the Gulf Coast, if you leave something in a hotel room and it gets taken back to the office, most times they stick it in a room because you might call up and they think it's a nothing. It turns out it's great-grandma's most precious thing you got to have back. So to avoid the headache, they'll stick it and hang on to it. The end of summer, 1st of September, they dump all of it in the Goodwill.
Yeah.
So I've gone to the Goodwill in Panama City, which is a big tourist area down here on the Gulf Coast. And that Goodwill's on the back, road. You got to just know where you're looking for to find the thing. My wife's the one that took me to it. And you walk in here, and here's nice leather jackets. Here was fishing equipment. There was easily a $200 shark rod, a $200 reel, and they wanted $25 a piece for them.
Sold.
Because they left it in the room. It was a shark set. Well, I picked it up for, $25, And so, look, everybody always talks about looking for the source of the electronics and stuff. Here's the other little tidbit I'll pass on to you, and I believe it's called Springfield, Alabama. It's up near Huntsville. And anything that is left in any airport in the United States, that's where it goes. So when you go through the airport and they confiscate your pocket knife, it ends up at Springfield, and they got this big building that you can walk in there and buy stuff. And a friend of mine, he goes up there, and all he does is they'll have 4-foot square boxes, 4 foot deep, 4 foot square, of knives and corkscrews and everything else. And anything that was confiscated at an airport. Well, he digs through and he looks for antique knives and Swiss Army knives and stuff, and they pay by the pound. I think it was $10 for 5 pounds. That's a pile of pocket knives.
I see a road trip in our near future.
A good friend of mine, he goes up there, he lives in Huntsville, and he goes up every year and goes through there just looking, especially after the holidays, because people, massive go, and he gets very desirable ballpoint pens. And yeah, there'll be electronics and everything else, whatever, that gets left behind or confiscated or whatever, but that's where it ends up. It goes to Alabama up there at Springfield.
Yeah, when we get done talking to Mr. Bennett, we can head on up to Springfield.
Yeah, do that, because I can call Don Davis, my good friend up there, and he'll take us straight to it. I've been there once, but he goes every year.
Yeah.
And he's come up with some beautiful stuff that, that they just put it out for whatever. And, the fancy laptops, they're going to put money on that. But pocket knives and stuff like that, the thing that got me was there was a stack of U.S. Army duffel bags. This is a soldier that you lost his stuff, and it's got his name stapled in all his unit rank and everything on the bottom. It's stenciled on the bag, and you're telling me you couldn't find him. Drop him off at any military base, so get it back to him. But when we went up there, we turned around, and here's this 6-foot square, and it's piled that high of U.S. Army duffel bags, full. And it's where some soldier was in transit. They lost his stuff at an airport. Well, here's where it ended up. And you couldn't get that back to him? He's in the Army. Drop it at any base. But, back to... that would be a good road trip for us to go up there and take a look at some of that stuff. But sources, once you know the sources, you can really help yourself and find things. So if you're looking for canning, we've talked about that. If you're looking to figure out how to butcher animals, we've talked about that. Ideas of where to go hunting, firearms, etc., we've talked about that. Just go back to the old ways and make lists of places for you to contact, books and things for you to get, and build up your own library and set it up. And that's the whole idea. Knowledge is power. When you know what to do, even if you've got no experience, but you at least know what to do, you've got an idea. I've never done a such and such, but I bet you in here he'll tell me how to extract a tooth, if I had to. If I had somebody that had a compound fracture, that would at least, that book on Where There's No Doctor will give me a working knowledge of what I can do to help the person and buy time till I can get them to a professional to do the job. That's the big thing, buy time.
Stabilize and transport.
Yeah. Whereas it might, a guy that I was reading about not long ago, him and his family live on a side of a mountain in Canada. And by dog sled, it's 5 days to the nearest place. Other than radio communication and call for a bush plane. That's it. There's no roads out of there.
Do you remember, it's probably been 10 or 12 years ago now, there was a guy who was rock climbing
Yeah.
in, I think it was Zion National Park out in Utah, and he fell, and the rock that he had been standing on fell on his arm, and he had to take his pocket knife and amputate his own arm to get out. That's a very extreme example of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Where you are your own first responder.
There was a guy back in about 83 or 84 that made national headlines. He was 54, 55 years old. He was cutting firewood for the winter, and a tree split wrong, and he turned to run, and the tree landed on he ended up on his face. The tree went across his legs, broke his left leg. No, broke his right leg on impact. His left leg was not broke. He's pinned out here. The temperature that night is going to be down in the low teens. He's wearing a t-shirt. That was it, because he'd been active. It was cool, but he was active, running that chainsaw.
And his cool weather gear is about 20 feet.
Yeah, it's over there. And he finally figured out that and there's nobody coming out here to find him. He's going to be here. He's pinned. He finally figured out that the chainsaw was still running and on the other side of the log. So he bent backwards as far as he could reach, and he couldn't quite reach it. He lacked about 3 inches. So he took a limb, hooked it with his arm, and pushing backwards till he broke his own other leg. His left leg now broke. He could reach backwards and get a hold of it and pull it to this side, and then he cut the log to roll it off of him. He crawled the 150 yards to his truck and drove himself in with 2 broke legs,
Yeah.
using a stick to work the pedals. That is determination. God, I may die, but I ain't quitting. Wow.
Who was the guy? I could just see his face, the mountain man, who was mauled by the bear. And they made the Revenant to tell the
Hugh
story.
Glass.
Hugh Glass, thank you. Hugh Glass is another good historical example of that. He was mauled by a she grizzly, a grizzly sow, and was left for dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he crawled 150 miles from where he was to where he needed to be before he could get any first aid.
Yeah.
And he was doing some very, very hinky things to maintain his life, but he maintained his life.
History is full, and medical records are full of instances of people being wounded, hurt, whatever,
Yeah.
and simply not giving up.
Yeah. There's we're maybe 200 yards from a site where I split my head open when I was about 15 years old and had to walk out. Had just covered in blood from the belt up before I got to a place where I could find somebody that would help me out.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it.
As long as you don't give up,
Don't quit.
just keep going. It's gonna hurt. The suck factor is gonna be pretty high.
Pain goes away.
Pain goes away. At the time, it seems to be the worst thing in the universe, but it does go away. And
If it doesn't completely go away, it moderates.
I've had multiple broke bones. If it was dumb and stupid and the girls thought it was cool, I had to try it.
I remember.
I've had dislocated knees. I've had dislocated shoulders, broken ribs, broke my neck. You know, again and again, you just got, like the car. I love to use the car analogy. whenever I wake up after some major impact or whatever, and I become aware, the first thing I do is don't start moving in a hurry. I slowly start, okay, start with the left foot, and I figure out what works, because you can hurt yourself worse if something is bad. So start really slow, run a systems check, find out what's still working, and then start trying to figure out about getting up, getting moving, whatever. And you know, they hated me at the ER because when I walk in, it's never something minor.
Oh, gee, Thomas, what have you got
oh,
now?
it's him. Oh my God. The time I came in, I'd been hit in the head with a bush hog blade. I stopped everything and got underneath it, and wire got wound up in it. And I turned the blade off. Tractor's running, the blade is completely stopped. I lifted it up and I got in there and I'm trying to pull that wire, and the wire goes to this blade over here, right? And so I put my hand on the back side of the blade and I'm pulling, thinking it's hooked here, and it came loose, and it's also attached here that I didn't know about. So when I pulled, it snatched loose, and then this blade swung and hit me above the hairline up here, and just about 6-inch gash hit me. Picked my scalp up, opened it up, blood ran in my eyes. I can't see instantly, I got blood in my eyes. And I had to navigate by sunlight back to get help, because I just, you know, I couldn't see. As much as you wipe, I couldn't see it, just blood's running. I'm trying to hold pressure on it. And the only thing I could think of was, okay, when I came out of the building, in the parking lot, it was for work actually. I was bush hogging a field next to the place I worked. The sun was on my back as I was walking to the truck, to the bush hog. So that means if I turned, I could feel the sun on me, you know, blazing hot Alabama sun. That means I am walking toward the parking lot. And that's a 2-acre lot. And I was on the far side of that 2 acres. And so I very slowly, very gently walked, always prepared to go in a chuckle or whatever, until I felt myself hit the edge, and I knew I was stepping in over the curb into the parking lot, and I just followed the wall around until I got to the front door of the building. When I opened the door and walked in, the secretary screamed and passed out because I'm covered in blood. And the next one that came in, I said, "Don't pass out, take me to the sink and let me rinse my eyes out." And so they guided me back there, and I splashed water, and I got where I could see again and realized how big and bad the cut was. And so that was a trip to the ER then. But I kept my head even though I was hurt. We didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have something I could whip out of my belt and say, "Hey, I'm hurt, come get me." No one was going to notice me for hours, you know. So you just got to keep your head about yourself. And what works? Well, everything else still works. You just can't see.
Yeah, when we did 12 or 13, we were talking about basic first aid and stuff like this. We stress then, we stress now. Don't have a meltdown. Don't have a come apart. Now, if you want, you know, we're not saying don't do it eventually. You know, get healed up, get your treatment, and then have your come apart. Okay,
Yeah.
That's cool. But during the crisis, during the event, don't do it, because if you do that, somebody might wind up dying. Okay.
I think I told the story that my good friend Grouch related to him and his wife and his youngest son were cleaning land on a place they had out in the country for a cabin to be put on. And the son and the mother were at one place and the dad was at the other. He was running a chainsaw. And the mother had picked up the wrong machete. The husband had gotten her a 4-foot long machete. That way when she swung, if it missed anything, it would hit the ground and not come back and hit her. She had picked up his short 18-inch machete, which was a razor.
It bounced.
And she went down and it bounced, and she hit herself right on top of the thigh, and it went clean to bone and stuck in the bone. And she pulled it out and just grabbed 2 handfuls of meat to hold it together. The son took off at a dead run, got the dad. The dad came running over Grouch. He got a hold of his wife. He told the son, "Run and get the 4-wheeler so we can get your mom to the truck." and the sun is turning ashen pale. He's about to pass out. And he said that, you know, Dad, and Francis grabbed a hold of him, shook him one time and said, you can't pass out right now. Mama needs you. Get the four-wheeler. And he straightened up, right, and he ran and got the four-wheeler. He pulled back up on it. He got off. Francis picked his wife up and sat her onto the four-wheeler so she could hold it in place. He climbed up behind her and he said, okay, you can pass out now. And Kenny went, okay, and out he went. He fell over backwards, out cold. They took off and went to the ER and they left the son there. Will he be okay? Yeah, he'll wake up. He'll be fine. But he put it off long enough until they had to, you know, and that was the thing. I don't want this to sound like we're, you know, preaching to people. We really don't mean that. We just want to take our experience and try to share it with you. That the number one thing in all of these situations and everything about the old ways was self-reliance, have faith in yourself to deal with a project, realize when it's beyond the scope of what I can do, but do what I can to buy time or make it better. That's one of the biggest things. Getting resources, getting educated, and admitting to yourself, I don't really know anything about that. That's not a bad thing to admit. I will tell you right now, I am not a plant expert. I have a good working knowledge enough to take care of me, but I am not an expert in the field. And that kind of shocks a lot of people because they're used to me being knowledgeable on topics, but the truth is I am not an expert. And so, on plants.
Okay.
And so, when I have a question, I go dig out the books and I look at it. Well, sir, I think this should be a long enough video.
Sorry I had to get up, but I had to take that phone
That's
call.
fine. We all have life. But guys, just do us a favor and put more questions or comments down there. And what we're going to do on the next one? What do you want to do? Put it on you, because you ought to throw it on me. So I'm putting it on you. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Let me think.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Let me think for a little bit. If anybody wants to contribute an idea, put it in
in the comments.
Put it in the comments. And we'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
That's the plan.
Yeah. You know, allowing for any unforeseen circumstance, we will be here.
Right.
But yeah, well, let me think on it.
All right, guys. Well.
It will probably be unreasonably complicated.
Oh, sure. Why not? Well, guys, we appreciate you watching, and thank you very much for all your comments, and we hope we can visit with you next time. We sure will have something to talk about. So, please leave anything down in the comments. So, until next time, I'm Blackie.
And Bear.
Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.